Hi, welcome back. I'm Dr. Yana Ott of Tolt Travel Therapy, and today we're talking about exercises to strengthen your glutes. Having weak glutes can cause back pain, knee pain, foot and ankle pain. You may even be experiencing cramping in the muscles or overuse in other areas in the body. So welcome. Today I've got Thor with me, my partner, and we're going to be talking about exercises to build strength in your glutes. So Thor, you've been working on glute strength to help recover from an injury. Tell me a little bit about your progression of learning these muscles.
Yeah, well, you started me off on some basic clamshell motions, and then I progressed all the way to deadlifts and then single leg deadlifts, which really help with the stability of your hips. So yeah, basic function of the clamshell. I was really surprised at really how deficient I was in that exercise.
Yeah, and sometimes you can move through the motion of the clamshell or any of these other exercises, but there's also compensating muscles that might be working. So we're definitely going to talk about that today. And I think when we worked together, that took some time to make sure that you were activating the muscle you wanted and not letting other muscles take over for them. So in addition to these exercises we'll be talking about in a moment, some other things that can really help improve glute strength are getting up periodically throughout our day. Sitting can be one of the things that weakens our glute muscles. So setting a timer on your computer or your phone if you do a lot of sitting for work, maybe every 45 minutes or hour, you're getting up, standing, or taking a small 2 or 3 minute walk. Even that can make a big difference in keeping your glute muscles active. The other thing that's important is feeling your muscles turn on. So check out our previous video about how to do a self-assessment of if your glute muscles are working, and put your hands on your hips while you're walking and see if you can feel those muscles turning on. That will help. Any other thoughts on building strength in the glutes?
It was important to my understanding that it's really important to build strength through the full range of motion.
Yes.
And I think a lot of times we compensate unconsciously, subconsciously for our weaknesses. And what we think might be, or because we're not thinking about it or we don't know, we're not really utilizing the full range of motion.
Really great point. The other piece to that is that we only build strength in the range of motion that we're training. So for the biceps, for example, if you only lift a weight here, you're going to be really strong here. But you might not be strong at that full extension point when you need to pick up a bag of groceries, or you might not be strong here when you're about to put something up onto a high shelf. So that is a really valuable point, that we need to be working through the full range of motion. That being said, as we go through these exercises and you try them at home, don't do anything that's causing pain. Stop. And you may start in a small range of motion and work up that range as you build strength and as you recover if you have an injury. Let's get started. Let's talk about some exercises you can do. So the first exercise I use to help people feel and activate their glute muscles is what we call the clamshell. You're going to be lying on your side. The goal is to have your hips stacked, one right on top of the other. And imagine that your feet are glued together. I like to have people bring their knees just a little more towards your chest. Perfect. And the knees are bent at about 90 degrees. To do this motion, you're gonna, again, keep your feet together, and you're just gonna be lifting the top knee up towards the ceiling. Nice. And back down. Now, one thing to note is there's 2 muscles that can do this action. The muscle we're looking for is the glute muscles in the back of the hip. But we also have a hip flexor muscle in the front that can do this muscle. So Thor, I'm gonna have you put your hand right here on the side of your hip. You're gonna feel in the front and in the back. Now you want to feel the muscles in the back turning on, and you want to feel the muscles in the front being more relaxed. So let's do 3 repetitions, and use your hand to feel if you're getting the right muscles turning on. Now, sometimes it's easy to feel that you're not quite getting the right muscles, but it's hard to actually change which muscle you're using. So if that's the case, a great strategy is to put your feet up against a wall. You can also lie on a couch or use your headboard of your bed. With this top foot, you're going to push back against the wall. I'm being the wall right now, and then lifting the knee. And what this does is helps to activate our posterior glute muscles more than the hip flexor in the front. Do you feel a difference, Thor?
Yeah, definitely. Before I was pushing on you, it was both my hip flexor and my glute, but it's much more my glute now.
Yes. And just remember, you may have a little bit of hip flexor activation. It doesn't have to be completely quiet as you're doing this, but the primary mover for your motion when you do this should be the muscles in the back. Great. So you can make this exercise more challenging by placing a band around the knees. Ta-da! With a band around the knees, you're doing the same motion. Just be very aware that that compensation doesn't start in the front of the hip. Thor's gonna show us an example of the wrong mechanics where he's letting his hips rock back as he lifts the knee up. What that does is using his back and his trunk to do the motion. So again, to isolate the hip motion, you shouldn't be moving your shoulders or your pelvis, just the knee is raising up and down. For the next exercise, I'm gonna have you stand behind the table. So lying on your side is one way to allow your hip muscles to build strength, but oftentimes we are using our glute muscles when we're standing, and maybe not standing perfectly straight, but we wanna be able to use them even when we're leaning down to pick something up. Or one of Thor's favorite exercises, the deadlift, requires you to be able to turn your glutes on, not just when you're in a straight hip position, but also when you're in a flexed hip position. So our next exercise is going to be just practicing turning on that muscle in a flexed position. So you're going to rest your arms on the table. And then in this position, all you're doing is tightening your glute muscles, thinking about squeezing your bottom. Sometimes the cue, trying to hold in gas is a good one, but turning the muscles on, holding for 5 seconds, and then letting it relax is a great way to start to get these muscles working in this position. How's that feel, Thor?
Good.
Feel like you can turn them on?
Yep.
But when we first started working on this, it was really challenging.
Yeah, that's right, it was.
To turn them on in this position. Now, remember that it takes 10,000 hours to become an expert at something. So a lot of times, we just need more repetitions of these small stabilizing muscles that help support us. So when you're waiting for your coffee in the morning, lean on the counter, turn the muscles on as many times as you can. Any downtime while you're waiting in line or sitting at a stoplight in the car, try turning these muscles on. The more repetition and practice you get, the more likely these muscles will turn on in your day-to-day activities. All right, Thor, back onto your side. Now we're gonna make all of these exercises more challenging. I'm gonna show you a progression on how to increase the strength in your glutes. All right, once you've mastered the clamshell and you know you can feel the back hip muscles working and not the front hip muscles as much, we're gonna take it to the next level. So this is a reverse clam. You're gonna start with the same motion as the clamshell, but here you're gonna pause, holding the knee, and then you'll rotate the foot towards the ceiling, bring the foot back down, and the knee back down. Do that again. Thor, up, foot down, knee down. Notice he's keeping great alignment and stability in his trunk and his hip. He's not rocking back, and he's holding that knee up high while he lifts his foot instead of letting it fall back down. Nice. And relax. The next progression exercise, you can keep the bottom knee bent and you're going to straighten the top leg. This is a diagonal up and back motion. So you're coming up, but also roll your hips forward, Thor, and come a little back, right? Coming down and up and back. Now again, this is targeting the hip muscles. If your foot is coming forward as you do this and up, you're using the hip muscle in the front. But if your leg is coming backwards and up, you should be using the hip muscle in the back. Can you feel the difference, Thor?
Yeah, absolutely.
Good. Relax. All right, keep this leg straight. The next exercise is hip circles. So you're gonna lift the leg up. It's just in line with the hip, doesn't have to be high, and you're making tiny circles. Now the motion is coming from the hip here. So imagine your leg bone is rotating in the socket. And relax. The last exercise in this position, you're gonna straighten both legs. You're lifting the top leg again to just about hip height, so a little lower. This leg's gonna stay here and you're tapping the bottom foot up to touch the bottom, or touch the top foot. There you go. So now we're working a little bit of the inner thigh and you're stabilizing this top leg using your glute muscles. Good, relax. Of course, we're also incorporating a lot of core strength as well. And again, you're not letting your pelvis or your shoulders roll back as you do these exercises. My next exercise for the glutes is a bridge. So you'll lie on your back with your knees bent. Your feet are about hip width apart. So your hip and knee and ankle, again, are in a nice line. You're gonna tighten the glute muscles and then lift the hips up off the bed, table, or floor. Hold for a few seconds and lower back down. Now, one thing you might notice is that Thor's keeping his knees apart as he comes up and down, not letting them come together. And this also helps to activate the glute muscles. You can even put a band around both knees to give you some feedback and make sure that you're keeping your knees apart. And as you might feel, this helps you activate those glute muscles a bit more when you've got the band. Good. When that exercise becomes easy, the next level for our glutes and core is a single leg bridge. So you're gonna straighten this right leg and just hold it there. Now you're using only the left glute to lift the hips up and down. What I'm watching for is that Thor's keeping his pelvis level. He's not letting this drop down as he's lifting up and down on his bridge. Good. Relax. The other thing too is he was keeping that hip, knee, and ankle alignment throughout. This knee wasn't wobbling in or out as he was going through the movement. Another variation that I love for the glutes is doing a bridge with your feet on a chair or a couch. So Thor's set up here lying on his back with his hips and his knees at about 90 degrees. He's got his toes pointing straight up towards the ceiling. And then again, he's still activating his glutes to lift the hips up and down. You can have a small pause at the top. This is going to be increased challenge for the bridge exercise. Good. How's that feel? You may also feel some of the hamstring muscles behind the leg and the calf muscles working as well. We call these the posterior chain, our glutes, hamstrings, and calves, and they often work together to support the body. The next position we're going to do some glute exercises in is on your hands and knees. Throughout this, you're going to be thinking about pulling your belly button up towards your spine. That activates your belly muscles and keeps your back nice and protected. The knees should be right underneath the hips and the hands right underneath the shoulders for good body mechanics. And we're going to start with what I call the fire hydrant. So imagine a dog peeing on a fire hydrant. You're going to be lifting your knee out to the side. Now, one thing to note for this is, again, we want to keep the back nice and straight and the hips relatively level. So your hip bones that stick out in the front should be pointing towards the ground. Nice adjustments, Thor. You can see his range of motion maybe doesn't go quite as high, but it's because he's isolated the movement to the hip instead of using his pelvis and his low back to get that motion. And again, you should feel it in the side of the hip muscle. Good. The next one is a donkey kick. You're still going to keep the knee at about 90 degrees. You're going to be kicking your heel up towards the ceiling. Now, don't let that core relax because I don't want you to be arching or bending through your back. You're just using those hip muscles to extend the leg up. Nice job, Thor. The next exercise, you're going to be straightening your leg behind you. And now you're just lifting the foot up parallel to your hip and back down. Again, don't let that core loose or let the belly sink down towards the floor. You're just moving with a straight leg. Now you've got a longer lever arm, and that's challenging those glute muscles even more. Good job. Thanks for testing out these exercises with us. Leave some comments below on how it went for you. Like and subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you on the next video.